For decades, the Leopard 1A5BR has been a familiar presence within the armored formations of the Brazilian Army. Introduced at a time when Brazil sought a reliable and affordable main battle tank to anchor its ground forces, the Leopard 1A5BR gradually became not just a piece of equipment, but a structural element of how Brazil thought about land warfare. Today, however, the question facing Brazil is no longer whether the Leopard 1 was once adequate. The real issue is whether this fleet has reached the final phase of its operational journey and how Brazil is managing that transition in a responsible and strategically coherent way. In the current structure of the Brazilian Army, the Leopard 1A5BR does not serve as a spearhead for high-intensity armored warfare. Brazil does not organize its ground forces around the expectation of large-scale tank-on-tank battles comparable to those envisioned in Europe during the Cold War, or observed in contemporary conflicts on other continents. Instead, the Leopard 1A5BR plays a stabilizing role. It provides a baseline armored capability for deterrence, training, territorial control, and combined arms integration. In this context, its continued presence is not an accident or an oversight, but the result of deliberate strategic choices shaped by Brazil's geography, threat environment, and fiscal realities. Brazil's vast territory, uneven infrastructure, and diverse terrain impose unique constraints on armored operations. Heavy main battle tanks optimized for dense road networks and short operational distances are not always well suited to long-range internal mobility or sustained deployments across remote regions. For many years, the Leopard 1A5BR offered a practical compromise. It was lighter than more modern main battle tanks, simpler to maintain, and adequate for the missions Brazil actually needed to perform. This is why the Leopard 1A5BR remained relevant long after it disappeared from frontline service in many European armies. That said, the technical reality of the Leopard 1A5BR cannot be ignored. The platform is aging. Its protection levels, fire control systems, and survivability fall short of modern standards in a high-intensity battlefield dominated by precision-guided munitions, advanced sensors, and networked fires. Even with incremental upgrades, there are hard physical limits that cannot be overcome without prohibitive costs. Brazil's defense planners are well aware that every additional investment into extending the Leopard 1A5BR's life must be weighed against alternative uses of scarce resources. One of the most significant constraints facing the Leopard 1A5BR fleet today is not technological obsolescence alone, but logistics. Global supply chains for Leopard 1 spare parts have tightened considerably. International demand for legacy armored vehicle components has increased, driven in part by conflicts elsewhere that have redirected available stocks toward urgent operational needs. As a result, Brazil has encountered growing difficulty in securing spare parts at predictable costs and timelines. This has directly affected the feasibility of large-scale modernization programs that once appeared viable on paper. Rather than viewing this situation as a failure, Brazilian defense institutions have approached it as a structural reality of the contemporary defense market. Instead of attempting to comprehensively modernize the entire Leopard 1A5BR fleet, Brazil has prioritized selective sustainment. The focus has shifted toward keeping a smaller number of vehicles operational, ensuring training continuity, and avoiding the trap of pouring excessive funds into a platform nearing the end of its cost-effective service life. At the same time, efforts to localize certain maintenance and spare part production capabilities have gained importance, reinforcing Brazil's long-term objective of greater industrial autonomy. The emergence of the Centauro Two within the Brazilian Army provides an important clue to how Brazil is redefining its approach to armored warfare. The Centauro Two is not a direct replacement for the Leopard 1A5BR in a traditional sense. It represents a different philosophy. Rather than prioritizing maximum armor and weight, Brazil has opted for a highly mobile, direct fire support vehicle that aligns more closely with its operational needs. The Centauro Two offers modern sensors, precision firepower, and strategic mobility, making it better suited for rapid response, border security, and deterrence across vast distances. This shift does not imply that Brazil has abandoned the concept of heavy armor altogether. Instead, it suggests a more nuanced understanding of where armored forces add the most value. In this framework, the Leopard 1A5BR increasingly occupies a transitional role. It bridges the gap between past doctrines and emerging concepts focused on mobility, networking, and flexible force projection. Seen through this lens, the gradual drawdown of the Leopard 1A5BR fleet is not a sign of decline, but a controlled evolution. Public attitudes in Brazil toward the Leopard 1A5BR reflect this pragmatic mindset. The tank does not dominate national headlines, nor does it provoke polarized political debate. When discussions do arise, they tend to center on efficiency, value for money, and strategic coherence, rather than nostalgia or prestige. Many Brazilians recognize that maintaining a credible defense posture does not require chasing the most expensive or fashionable equipment. What matters is whether investments strengthen national security, support domestic industry, and remain sustainable over time. Within defense-oriented communities and professional circles, there is broad acceptance that the Leopard 1A5BR cannot form the backbone of Brazil's armored forces indefinitely. At the same time, there is little appetite for abrupt or symbolic decisions that would leave capability gaps. The prevailing view supports a phased approach where the Leopard 1A5BR continues to serve in limited roles, while newer systems gradually assume greater responsibility. This approach aligns with Brazil's broader defense modernization strategy, which emphasizes continuity, institutional learning, and incremental transformation. Looking ahead, the future beyond the Leopard 1A5BR remains deliberately open-ended. Brazil has not rushed to announce a specific next-generation main battle tank program, and this restraint is telling. Rather than committing prematurely to a single solution, Brazilian planners appear focused on evaluating how evolving technologies, regional security dynamics, and industrial partnerships will shape land warfare over the next decade. Questions about whether Brazil truly needs a heavy main battle tank, or whether a mix of mobile fire support vehicles, drones, artillery, and networked systems can deliver comparable deterrence, remain under active consideration. In this sense, the Leopard 1A5BR is best understood not as a relic clinging to relevance, but as a marker of transition. Its continued service reflects Brazil's preference for measured, rational decision-making over abrupt shifts driven by external pressures. As Brazil looks toward the period between 2030 and 2035, the legacy of the Leopard 1A5BR will likely be defined less by its limitations than by how effectively it helped bridge two eras of Brazilian ground force development. The end of the Leopard 1A5BR's road, whenever it comes, will not represent a failure. It will signal the conclusion of a chapter that supported decades of stability and institutional growth. More importantly, it will underscore Brazil's capacity to adapt its military posture with discipline and foresight, ensuring that modernization serves national strategy rather than the other way around.